And now it is my pleasure to invite the recipient of the award for Excellence in Graduate Studies to speak for the graduate class of 2016. The award winner is Stephen Currie, an educator and author of many books, and who is receiving his Master of Arts in Educational Psychology.
Thank you so much. When I was quite young, my parents took me down to the Jewish Community Center of the Southside Chicago neighborhood where we lived, and they enrolled me in the 2-morning-a-week 3-year-old program. And I apparently took to it like a duck to water. According to family lore, I came home that very first day of school with a new and wonderful song to sing around the house. Who killed Antiochus? Tell me, please. I know the Maccabees. However, it was louder and more off-key. And that was my first brush with formal education, but not my last. Ever since then, I've been involved in teaching and learning in some form or another, as a student, as a classroom teacher, teaching specialist, education writer, college instructor, husband, father, you name it. My life has always been defined by the rhythms of the academic year. September to June, and then a summer. September to June, and then summer again. So this background and this wonderful occasion makes me think about what education is, its goals, its purpose, and more generally about what learning is. And I'm reminded of a second-grade student I taught a number of years ago who knew precisely what education was all about. One day she completed a writing assignment and she handed it back to me. "Is it good?" she demanded. "It looks just fine," I assured her, scanning it quickly. But that wasn't quite the answer she had in mind, because she fired back, "But is it better than everybody else's?" So, okay, the point of learning is not doing better than everybody else. I think most of us would probably agree with that. But if learning isn't about being better than everybody else, what is it about? For further insight, I turned to another child, a first grader I worked with earlier this year in my capacity as an elementary math specialist. I gave this boy 6 little cubes, and I asked him to count them, which he did perfectly, quickly, easily, and accurately. "You have 6 cubes, I reminded him. Now suppose that I had 6 cubes too. How many cubes will we have altogether?" There are lots of ways that 6-year-olds might figure out a question like that, and he used the strategy of saying the first number that popped into his head. 10, he said. "Ah," I said, mentally double-checking that the answer to 6 plus 6 was still 12, which it was. "And how did you come up with that answer?" He grinned. "I knew it," he said, "because I am very, very good at math." All right, being very, very good at something may be a goal of learning, but I think we can all agree again that it isn't a good idea to be completely sure about answers that are, wrong. So that made me think about a kindergartner I encountered one day a couple years back in the school corridor. "Something on your mind?" I asked, noticing that she looked a little bit unhappy. She gave a heavy sigh. "I don't know all of math yet," she said to me. Well, I told her that was just fine, that I didn't know all of math yet either. And her eyes got very big as she contemplated what that meant. And now that I have a master's degree, I can assure you that I still don't know all of math. And that's still just fine. So the goal of learning can't be to know all of anything, not even math. So perhaps the goal of learning is actually understanding. I did a lot of community theater at one point, and I had a friend who directed me in a lot of plays. And occasionally one of her actors would say, "Gee, I really need to memorize my lines," whereupon she would draw herself up to her full height, which was approximately 5 feet 1.5 inches. And she would intone, "Learn! Learn your lines! Do not memorize your lines, learn your lines," by which she meant, don't just recite them, instead understand them. Know the context of the line within the scene. What comes before? What comes after? Why the character says the line. I do this with math. I don't just want children to memorize the multiplication facts. I want them to know the relationships, the connections between those facts, to understand what it is they're doing. It's altogether too easy for us to think of out-of-context information as learning, though. I do this myself. In high school, I became quite interested in family history for a while, especially one branch of my family, ethnic Germans, living in England when World War I broke out. Didn't work out so well. They eventually left Britain and moved to America. Back in high school, I was interested in the bare bones of their lives. Who, what, where, when, names, dates, and places. Years later, I inherited a whole bunch of letters written by my great-grandparents during the war. And I learned that the family had been separated for 4 years. 4 years. My great-grandfather and some of the children in Iowa, the rest of them in London. Today, learning how and why is of less importance to me than understanding. What was it like to know my family members? What was it like to be them? I'm no expert on these ancestors, but I'm a lot closer to understanding them today than I was when my interest was limited to the facts of the matter. But increasingly, I suspect that the true goal of learning goes beyond simply understanding and involves instead engagement, the compulsion to grapple with ideas. Several years back, I presented a simple Pi Day lesson about the number pi to a group of fourth graders. One young lady was especially taken with an offhand remark I'd made that you could round pi to either 3.14 or 3.1416. And after class, she approached me to ask what difference it made if you chose one or the other. We spent the next half hour drawing diagrams and carrying out fourth grade style calculations, and at the end, she was completely delighted with herself. She demonstrated that it made essentially no difference if you rounded pi to 2 decimal places or to 4. The girl had missed out on a free period, and she could not possibly have cared less. She had a burning question. She needed to answer it, and she did exactly that. Which reminds me in turn of a 19th century woman inventor named Amanda Theodosia Jones, I love that name, who I ran across while doing research for a book on women inventors. Jones was not an inventor by trade, she was a spiritualist. One day, however, she heard a voice from the spirit world saying, "Friends, did you know there is a way of preserving meat without boiling it?" Jones knew nothing about methods of canning, food preservation, but it was clearly up to her to find this way to preserve meat without boiling it, and she set out to do exactly that. After years of intensive study, research, and focus, Jones developed and patented a vacuum canning process much more effective than anything that had come before. She had to. My pie-obsessed student and Amanda Theodosia Jones don't seem to have much in common. They lived in very different centuries, for starters. But they do share this thirst for knowledge, this passion for understanding, this compulsion to engage with ideas. I found this here at Marist in the graduate program, in my fellow students, in my professors. People who engage, people who debate, people who are not satisfied with simple and often simplistic answers. More than anything else, when I think of learning, I think of this need to engage. It would be unreasonable to expect us, any of us, to have this overwhelming desire to learn every moment of every day. That would be exhausting, if nothing else. But as I look back over a lifetime in education, a career in learning and teaching, a series of graduate courses here at Marist College, I believe that this is the compulsion that we should be aiming for. To paraphrase Tennyson, had he been a teacher and a student rather than a poet, our goal needs to be to strive, to teach, to learn, and not to yield. Congratulations to all, and thank you.